I would describe networking is like dating. Like, you're building a relationship, right? Like, you're going out there, like you're putting yourself out there and you're like really trying to understand the other person. And it's only going to work if you understand the other person. For me, like just people fascinate me. That's why I think I'm so good at networking. Like, I really like learning about people, like what really drives them, like what they're interested in, what motivates them. And it's all of those things that like, really like helps like me with my network. And because I build meaningful relationships, I never go into chatting to somebody because I'm like, you know what, like, yeah, I just want to have like that name in my address book. Like, no, it's for me, it really is understanding what they're all about and having that genuine interest in like people.
Before we get into today's show, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have going on over here at Succession. So Succession is a life science sales membership that includes on-demand courses to up-level your sales skills, resources to plan and execute your sales process, a community for peer-to-peer networking and learning, and live workshops delivered by experts twice a month. You can get access to all of this as an individual for just $79 a month, or you can up-level your entire sales team with courses and customized learning designed for each individual rep. Come and join us over at succession.bio. Okay, let's dive back into the show.
Hey, so this week we've got a good one. We've got Saleha Patel. Saleha and I go way back. We're both board members at ELRIG. We've worked together, we've worked at the same companies in the past as AstraZeneca. We've known each other for a long time. So it was actually really nice to hear some of her background that maybe I don't always get stuck into when we're just having a coffee or a glass of wine. She spoke a lot about networking, how it's important to her. And I think she's somebody I look to as is actually really great at networking. So that was really interesting to hear. And some of her work in translating research into commercial companies.
Yeah, I think too, like hearing how companies like AstraZeneca, other pharma companies think about working with external vendors, like always kind of looking out onto the horizon, what's new, what's coming, evaluating new technologies and CROs. It's a different angle from I think what we normally have on the podcast, where we're talking more to the, the sales reps. This is more like, hey, this is a potential type of customer, right? Or an advocate that you can leverage internally at one of these organizations. And then if you stay around till the end, she actually shares a little bit about how she does not like certain messaging that reps send her. So be on the lookout for that if you stay till the end. Hey, Saleha, welcome to the show. We're pumped to have you here.
Me too. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, and so during the prep for this, right before the show, I know it was a tough one to come up with, but we always ask everybody the same question. Give us a crazy or funny story that's happened in your career.
So actually the start of my career, I would say, was a crazy beginning. So I was all prepped to go study medicine. And then through lots of different reasons, I didn't get my place in medicine. I didn't, it didn't happen. So I basically rang up on the day I got my exam results. I was like, right, I've got no plan for a gap year. What am I going to do for the next year? My parents are going to be like on my back. Do I really want to stay at home? No, I don't. So I got a list of all the UK universities and I just rang them up and I said, hey, like, you looking for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old to join your course? I'm very good at biology and chemistry. And so most of them, as you can imagine, said no, thank you. But the University of York actually said, oh, wait, we don't normally go through clearing, but just like, I will hang on to your details. And if something comes up, we'll give you a call back. And then about 2 hours later, they rang me up and they were like, well, you won't believe what's happened. Someone's just dropped off the course. So would you like to come to the university? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, sure. Why not? Let's do that. And yeah, before I knew it, I'd signed up to a biochemistry course in York. I didn't know where York was. I mean, this is embarrassing, but Yorkshire, you would have thought, but no, thought it was somewhere in the Midlands. I mean, that's really embarrassing, isn't it? And then, yeah, my parents took me over to see the university. And then before I knew it, a couple of months down the line, I was starting my journey in biochemistry. So that's my unusual story.
So straight out from that, I've known you a long time and I didn't know that story. But anyone listening to this in the sales team are going to be like, you just made a series of prospecting calls to get onto a university course. Your next career move needs to be into sales.
Oh, absolutely. But that's not the first story either like that. So when
There's
I was
another one?
yeah, there was another one. So when I was picking my PhD, I was young and naive, and I was down in London working at CRUK. I remember this really well. And then my boyfriend at the time, he was like very determined. I'm gonna go study criminology, and I know exactly where I'm going to do it. And then I was like, well, what about me? Like, we're living together. Am I gonna be just out on the street now? What am I gonna do? And then I again, like at Leicester, I just went through the directory of like all the PIs, and I was like, what? Who's doing some interesting science? Like, who can I actually like um, get in touch with to say, hey, do you have a PhD coming up? And believe it or not, somebody actually got back to me saying, "Oh, I do actually have a position that's coming up. Will you actually be able to come for an interview tomorrow?" And so I got this interview, and I was like, "Okay, yep, sure. I'm going to go up to Leicester for my interview." Got on that train, had my interview, came back, and before I even got home, I got a call to say, "Oh, we'd like to offer you the PhD position." So,
That's awesome.
so that's the second story, Nick.
I'd say this is like a lesson. We hear these kind of themes repeated in certain people, and people that have normally got the most interesting jobs and interesting careers aren't ones that set out to go after that role. Um, and I think there's a quote I like that says, "Life is what happens when you're busy making plans." And I think the people we find with the most interesting careers and paths are the ones that have just tried their luck and also taken the opportunities that fall in front of them. And I think that's you've got to be in it. You just got to keep trying. I think that's a good. I like.
Oh, absolutely. But what's the worst that happens, right? That's what I always say to myself. Like, you reach out to people. I mean, you'll either get no response or they say no to you, or actually, on the off chance, you might get a, "Hey, yes, we wanna have a chat." And I think that's the thing, right? Just taking that risk. And yes, sometimes cold calling doesn't work, but in this occasion, it's worked out twice for me. So
Well, it's also because you're being proactive and going out and doing something that's against the norm of what most people do. Like most people will just go look for jobs and then apply. Whereas you took the list and said, who's actually doing cool science that I would want to work with? And then you just reached out to all of them and then,
yeah,
numbers game, somebody responds and you go in there, you crush it and get the role.
absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And so know now you are at AstraZeneca for a little bit longer. And I think we wanted to learn a little bit more about kind of the role that you had there, because I think there's some good parallels for how companies look to external vendors such as like CROs, et cetera, in order to sort of make purchasing decisions, kind of understand what's out there in the industry. And I think you had a really unique position where you can share some interesting insights with all of the listeners.
Yeah, sure. So I work in a group called Emerging Innovations within AstraZeneca, and we work across three different areas. So one is open innovation, which is our mechanism for AstraZeneca to engage externally with academic groups and really early stage ideas. And we also share lots of our tools and our compounds and data, etc., to really help the ecosystem externally. And it's quite a philanthropic way of doing research with open collaboration. And that's open to everybody. So there's a website, people can go and have a look at that and, explore what's available there, especially if you're academic. But the other two areas within our group are indication discovery, which is one area that I supported quite a lot within my role. And that is all around trying to identify new clinical indications used for assets that we already have within the pipeline. So most people are familiar with the concept of drug repurposing, but this is around drug repositioning and pre-positioning actually, which is all about trying to identify new disease areas for assets to go into, but also opportunities earlier on. So most drugs can go into um different areas, but they happen they the people are thinking about this once you've already got your primary indication, you've been into the clinic, potentially you even marketed your asset. And here what we're trying to do is like think more entrepreneurially and think, how do we leverage big data sets and new science and technology coming forward, lots of AI and machine learning models now being generated. How do we use that to predict indications and go into some of these areas earlier on. And that also, and it, is around trying to do the right experiments as well and to validate hypotheses at the preclinical stage. And so when you're doing that, you have to think about, actually, does this new area of science exist within the company? Oh, no, it doesn't. Who do we go to externally to do that, to leverage our partners, our collaborators, but also when you're designing your experiments, whether that's an in vitro assay or an in vivo model that you need, then, you do have to reach out to CROs. You have to reach out to vendors who have those novel tools and technologies that aren't necessarily within the organization. And the third area that our group works in is an area called R&D Delta, and that is all around horizon scanning and trying to identify what's the next big thing in drug discovery 5 to 10 years out from now. So what is going to be the next AI or CRISPR type technology of the future? And then identify those early stage ideas in the ecosystem, whether they're in academic groups, whether they might be a stealth company, there might be a startup, for instance. And if it's an area that we think it could be strategically important for the future, then try and build those relationships that generate that proof of concept data for applications for drug discovery or applications that are important to AstraZeneca, and then build that body of data so that we can help them scale up and progress it to a point where it is becoming something that gets embedded within the drug discovery pipeline. And again, that's a lot of that is building relationships with VCs, incubators, and accelerators to try and source some of these ideas, but then also working directly with the entrepreneurs themselves to help them shape these ideas and give them some mentorship, and also co-run some studies and some collaborations to do that proof of concept study for pharma applications.
So that's all really interesting. In terms of the emerging technologies and how you connect to those co-founders, if it isn't through their investors, then how else do you find them? Is it publications? Is it conferences or some?
It's a mixture of everything. So conferences is one of them. Publications is another thing. But a lot of it is through the network. That is really how we find them. We have to. There's in our internal network within AstraZeneca, an external network through all the people that I come across on a daily basis, through all the various organizations I interact with. And then also through networking events as well. There's a lot of events, that you go out there, and there's a tech bio meetup somewhere happening in Cambridge. And I'm lucky enough to be in Cambridge. So, there's a lot going on in the biotech space. And then also, close enough to London as well. So, there's so many of these going on. And that's, really how you can leverage some of these kind of environments to try and source new ideas, and also to go meet like entrepreneurs as well, and just have a chat with them and like see what they're up to.
Yeah, I think networking is something that we should pick up on there, because most of our audience are sales professionals, and networking should be a big part of your job. And it's something I'm a geek about. I love doing it. But we've known each other for a while now, Saleha, and I'd say that outside of sales professionals, you do this particularly well, right? And it's not something that has to be your job initially. So my question, I guess, is what advice would you give to anyone listening about networking and where to start and how to build it?
So I would describe networking as like dating. Like, you're building a relationship, right? Like, you're going out there, like you're putting yourself out there, and you're like really trying to understand the other person. And it's only going to work if you understand the other person. And I think that's like, for me, like just people fascinate me. That's why I think I'm so good at networking. Like, I really like learning about people, like what really drives them, like what they're interested in, what motivates them. And it's all of those things that like, really like helps like me with my network. And, because I build meaningful relationships. I never go into chatting to somebody because I'm like, you know what, like, yeah, I just want to have like that name in my address book. Like, no, it's that for me, it really is understanding what they're all about. And having that genuine interest in like people. And so yeah, and that's kind of how I approach networking. It's really like less about me talking about myself, but more about listening to what other people are saying. And I think that's the key, especially if you're in sales or any role, right? Is like listening is always like the key to communication. And the other thing to think about is actually okay, like, that person might have something that you want, not immediately, but maybe in the future as well, right? Like those, no connection, I think, is, like a wrong connection or a bad connection. I think, they might not be right for that moment in time, but they might come back to you in the future, or you might have to go to them in the future. So it's always worth, like, having the same approach to everybody you come across.
And I think too, like you also have to go out and do it, right? Like
Yes.
networking doesn't just come to you.
No.
Yeah, it's like you have to actually be proactive, and it's not always easy to put ourselves out there. Like I kind of consider myself like an introverted extrovert, right? Like sometimes I can just sit at home and do nothing and be happy with myself, and then other times I like need to be out with people. Um, but yeah, it's always easy to put yourself out there. But if you want to build a strong network and you want to do it, I mean, it's just so important to go to these different events. There's so many out there that are free to just attend. And so you just gotta put yourself out there.
Oh, absolutely. You just have to do it. Like, there have been some times where I've like turned up to something and I'm like, oh, I'm really tired. And I just, why am I doing this? And then, you go there and you like start speaking to people and you're like, no, it was worthwhile. I've never come out of a networking event and gone, you know, oh no, that was completely useless. Like there's always somebody I've spoken to who
Mhm.
like, you've like learned something interesting, or you go on to work with, or, there's something that always comes out of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for us introverts, um,
Yeah. Sure, Nick. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'm like chasing people down in the street. Talk to me.
you're,
Yeah.
you're like a golden retriever.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, a person. Let me go talk to them.
Oh, new person. Forward of that one.
Yeah, new shiny person, yeah.
Exactly. You said it was like dating. So one key question I have is: should I say to my wife I'm off out dating or networking? Which one will get me?
Uh,
Oh, well, I don't know. Depends, like, happy wife, happy life, know what I mean?
To be honest, I think she'd be happier knowing I'm off dating. She's like, "There's a chance he's gonna go." I'll get rid of
uh,
him.
Oh,
that's good.
I can't answer that question for you, Nick. You're on your own.
And I guess regarding networking, I'm sure it's led to some of the different organizations
Mhm.
that you're a part of as well, right? So it's not just networking for the sake of your day job where you're trying to like if you're in sales. It's not like networking just for the sake of closing opportunities, closing deals. There's networking for other sort of opportunities, and I'm sure that's how you landed a number of the different
Mhm.
sort of roles you have now, right?
Yeah, so that's true. So ELRIG is a big part of my life, and I volunteer for ELRIG. So I'm a board director there, and I also chair the scientific program work group. But that's
Mhm.
not what I always did. I was prior to that when I first joined ELRIG. I was actually part of the networking events work group, organizing networking events like for but academia, industry, and biotech to come together to find opportunities to learn from each other, share knowledge, innovate, like make connections, and really, through all of that, like find opportunities to collaborate and move the field forward in a specific area. And so that's kind of where I started. And then kind of moving like from there, I chaired the networking events work group. And then that kind of then became part of the science strategy work group, and now I'm like, lead this enormous group and have a massive responsibility for the scientific program for ELRIG. And we run quite a lot of events, so we run 10 events a year, 4 very large conferences and 6 forums. And what's amazing is I think, through all of this, like, so everyone is a volunteer within ELRIG, right? Like, or the majority of people are, and it's people giving up their time to really enable networking within the community. And that's really, I think, the main purpose of ELRIG is to make those connections and form those connections between all the different areas and the amazing science that happens across the sector. And innovation always happens at the interfaces of areas. That's the beauty of it, right? Bring two people together from very different areas and you come up with something potentially that's going to revolutionize the way we go into the future. So yeah, so I have a very, very fortunate job here of like, being able to bring those people together to try and come up with topics and themes for really cool science events, and then go out, even further and then identify those people who are really leaders in this space and to come and talk about what they're doing and the science they're doing. And I think one thing that's also amazing about ELRIG is all our events are free to attend. And also all our networking opportunities are free. And I think that's fundamentally for me, that's very, very important. So you mentioned like I'm involved in a number of organizations and I do a lot of work again with in the social mobility and low socioeconomic diversity space. And there I'm really passionate because I come from a background where, opportunities were limited. I only got to where I got to because it's through, building my network. It's meeting the right people, building those connections, and, then hopefully having those opportunities, um, not come to you, but you are being able to more easily find those opportunities. And a lot of it is around who you know and what you know rather than what you know. Unfortunately, that is the situation. And so, so therefore that like kind of free to attend, opportunity for networking that ELRIG provides, access to that scientific content. And that's open to everybody, regardless of what walk of life you're from, I think is really important to me. Because that is, I think, fundamental barrier to success is not having those opportunities and not knowing the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a couple ELRIG events myself. Yeah, I know you both are on the board there, but yeah, as an unbiased party, um, I do really enjoy the events because you do get a lot of that. Like, there is like actual networking time set aside where you can go to meet people. It's very open, inclusive. It's free to attend, which is always nice. And so, yeah, even if your company doesn't want to, purchase a ticket to go, like you can still go yourself as an individual contributor. You kind of get yourself out there. You could just go meet with people. So
Yeah, and you're genuinely meeting senior leaders. That's the bit that I found really impressive. Like when because I joined as an early career professional, and I was just amazed and in awe of the fact that, we've got like some serious, like, big people like in the industry, like at these meetings. And I was like, wow, like, starstruck because some of these are like, the people when you're like, a junior scientist thinking they're like your kind of like rock stars of science that are turning up. And I was like, what is this? It's free to attend and there must be a catch somewhere. They even give you a free lunch. Wow. Like, yeah, now there really is something fishy going on.
do they do autograph signings too? Do they just have them
Yeah.
all lined up at the back of the room
Well,
and you go get
you
everything
say that.
signed?
No, they don't do the order. No, but they do network like a boss, right? If you're an early career professional, you can actually
Mm.
go and like, a lot of senior leaders are willing to give up their time to meet early career talent. And so, there is like at our biggest event, which is Drug Discovery, happening in October later this year. So if anybody's listening and want to sign up, go have a look.
I can say that when they do network like a boss, all of the bosses are not always great because I've been one. So be careful who you network with.
Don't say that, Nick. If you don't get Nick, you're going to be okay. But
Exactly.
thankfully,
This
he's
is
not
what
going to be one of the bosses this year.
Yeah, that's for the best.
Yeah. But we've got the likes of people like, Marcus Schindler, who's like, he's the CSO of Novo Nordisk coming up. He's giving the keynote and he's going to be interacting with our early career talent. And then, we've got Steve Rees, who's like a senior VP at AstraZeneca, who's coming to the meeting. So there's a lot of people, if you want to meet people in big pharma, if you want to meet people in CROs, in biotech, in academia, like this is the place to be because we cover it all. And it's really, I think it's really important to us that we are open access, we are free to attend, just so that people have this opportunity and to like, just get the benefits of it without having to pay extortionate conference prices, which you have to do with some conferences.
I think the social mobility part you spoke about is important. So, as you know, we've spoken before, and I come from a more working class background, let's say. So much so that when I started applying to university, this was back in the day when a prospectus would arrive, like a little catalogue, and you could read through it of what the courses were. I had like 3 of them arrived in a week. And my dad looked at these things and he was like, what are you doing? Like, this is a waste of time and money. Go get a trade. So he wanted me to go be a builder or something because I wanted to be a marine biologist. And this was like a waste of time in his mind because you're going to do 3 years, spend a load of money and still have to be a builder. Just go be a builder. Right.
Yeah. And then we learned just before this that you've got way too pretty hands for that.
Imagine I was coming today, 18th of August. You'll see my pretty hands if you want to see that.
Oh my god, that's so good. Oh, nice.
Yeah, definitely going to be a builder. Yeah, switching gears a little bit. Maybe you could talk a bit about your new role where you're working with Green Mary University about tech transferring ideas out of the lab into industry and into research, because that's really interesting for me how that process happens.
Yeah, sure. So I was lucky enough to be awarded an honorary title of a lecturer at QMUL recently, and that was from the working with them as a collaborator. So I've been collaborating with them for over 4 years. Again, another opportunistic moment, right, through networking. There was another project that we were working on. Somebody introduced me to them after realizing I would needed some help building a hypothesis. They had the right models and the right science. So we started talking to this group and ever since then, we've been working very closely together and doing some amazing science in an area of very high unmet medical need in cardiovascular disease. Yeah, so and I think that role kind of evolved because given my current role in emerging innovations, which is all around, trying to identify early stage ideas through, through our networks, through collaboration, through partnerships. One thing that kind of happened kind of organically through this relationship was actually being introduced to other people in the department and going, oh, how did such and such a body work with industry, or how do they collaborate, or spin out their ideas, or can you introduce them to a CRO or a vendor that has an access to this assay or this model or some expertise. And so that's kind of how that's kind of came about. And so now, as part of my role there, I am like, continuing to help engage in the science, but also thinking about um, helping other academics look at translating their research outside of academia into industry potentially, but also thinking about what other kind of companies and organizations that are out there that can help them with their research as well.
And how do you see this process being different from you're creating like a product, a service, something like that, versus if you're trying to spin out for like a therapeutic um, indication, something like that?
So I think that's quite an interesting question. So I think this is what like the mistake a lot of like mistakenly like what a lot of people think is, pharma, they're just out for like new therapeutics. Actually no, like, there's a massive need for like, translatable assays and models and, tools as well. And, there's a lot of things that happen in academic groups that are really innovative, but people are just not thinking about how they commercialize that. They could have some tools that could really change the way we're gene editing, for instance, or they could have like algorithms that could really enable us to predict new targets. And it's, enabling and like empowering academics to really think, that actually, that assay that I've developed like really has some commercial potential, or that model does not exist anywhere else and could really
Mm,
enable the development of new medicines. So there is a potential for like, me to commercialize that. And so it's kind of that giving them that realization that, oh, okay, it's not, I need like the next blockbuster, like, therapeutic. There's a lot of other things that I'm working on that can be really commercial as well. And again, like, it's also, a lot of academics also fear that, I've got this idea and like if I commercialize it, I've got to go on and become the founder and CEO of this company and I'm not commercial at all. I don't have a business mind. But it's, being the founder doesn't actually mean, or having the idea doesn't mean that you have to then go on to, be part of that company or even have any sort of role in that space. You could just have an advisory role, or you might decide not to be part of it at all, or you might decide to be the CEO. That's all of those things are fine, but there's definitely lots of different routes to commercializing that idea,
mhm,
which means that, but also keeping like, the parts of your role that are really important to you and continuing to do the science that you always want to do. So it doesn't have to be either or. You have a choice. You can do both, neither, or you can do one or the other. There's lots of routes forward.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased you introduced that concept that way, because actually it's pretty much the reason I wanted to start what we're doing here at Succession. Is that when interviewing for a position, I found so many founders that were falling into these roles of the commercial aspect of trying to do business. They had no real passion or interest in it, but felt they've got to do it. We were like, well, if we could build something that supports these people commercially, that could really help technology end up improving patients' lives ultimately. But otherwise, a lot of great science just is never going to make it out of the lab. And it's such a shame that it could be making such a big impact and it just isn't.
So what do you recommend to those people? Like, well, how do you even know that you have something that's even worth like trying to think about commercializing, right? Like if you don't know what you don't know, like, do you recommend that people just go and like share what they're working on? Like how do these sort of insights come out to where somebody can realize that this is something that I can commercialize and I
Mhm.
should go down that path?
Yeah, so if you're in an academic institute, they'll often have a tech transfer office or some sort of, innovation group there that really supports this type of stuff. So go have a chat to them first because they will have seen lots of this before. They probably have already spun out ideas out of the university. They'll also be able to help you identify funding as well. If you need to do a key killer experiment that's really gonna make your innovation from, yeah, it's got potential to no, this is amazing. Like, every pharma company wants it in their lab. They'll be able to like help you with that. And then also engaging with companies like AstraZeneca, right? We have an open innovation platform that I talked about. Through that you get, access to expertise across AstraZeneca. And, hopefully that'll also help you shape your application and your idea earlier on. And I think that's another mistake that gets made quite a lot. They come, there's an idea, you work on it, work on it, work on it, and then you get to the point where, right, I'm ready to commercialize it. And then it's too late, right? Because, you spent all that time, building something and thinking about an application that might not even be relevant to the industry. And so, if you actually did that like right on the onset, like, outset, like thinking about it very as early as you can to make those connections and those interactions, at least then you have a really like, much more kind of informed path to commercializing and into venture building, because you want to know as early on, like, okay, am I wasting my time doing this experiment? Am I wasting all this funding doing something that's not even going to be relevant? Like, what, like, we talk a lot about minimal viable product, right, in innovation, and that's effectively what you're trying to get to. And there's some key things that you will have to do that investors would like to see, also like, partners and collaborators like to see. And so yeah, my like advice would be just, interact with somebody as early as possible and get like, that feedback from your customers and through your kind of your potential market.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, if you're even if you're not like the founder, right? It's just like how do you
Mhm.
have as many conversations with as many people as
Yeah.
possible to like understand the broad landscape of
Mhm.
where you think you might be able to fit this product, service, tech,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But it's like it has to come from conversations. It can't just be, and it has to be like a wide background of people from conversations.
Mhm.
Because like I know Nick, you've got a good story of an example of like you didn't know like it was like cosmetics was going to be like a market for one of the products you used to sell, right? And it's like you didn't find this out till you had a conversation with somebody, and it was like, holy crap, this is like a really needed product in this particular niche. It's like unless you have that wide range of conversations, you may not find the right place to actually start, like the wedge to start actually selling your product or service to get product market fit.
Yeah, that was a sensory neuron product. We thought we were selling into the pain market. Turns out it was great for irritation assays for the cosmetics market. And it like just blew the numbers out of the water just with the cosmetics needs alone. And we found out that the pain market wasn't big enough because rat models were doing the job. Like,
Yep.
but
It's like just because you think you have a better mousetrap, pun intended, doesn't mean it actually is, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that the market's ready for it or that they're actually going to like change. Like, and one of the biggest challenges introducing any new product, right, is like this: you have to break the status quo. People do the same things forever. It's like this is the way we've always done it, and it's so
Yes.
hard to break that status quo. It's like just because you have a new way to do it doesn't mean that people are going to be willing to change what they're doing today. So there has to be a big enough like hurdle, gap, etc., for them to like get over it and disrupt that status quo.
and to be honest, this
Absolutely.
little group here, we can teach you how to disrupt status quo. Saleha can get you investment. Just come talk to us free. We'll sort you out.
Oh,
Business
that's
is free
awesome.
started.
And
This is like Nick's like, yeah, he's my like cheerleader for getting me a new job here.
uh, I love it. Well, we're coming up on time, and so I know we kind of are hinting at some of the different things sales related towards the end here. But you had or you have had so far a good career in the sciences, and you've probably interacted with many different sales reps throughout your time. So what is something that you've seen or, seen across the board for a number of different sales reps or reps that you didn't like working with, as an example, that reps should stop doing?
Oh, I tell you what, really irks me is when I get an email in my inbox and, they go, oh, here's all my product offering, without actually doing their research on who I am. And I'm like, well, first, I don't work in this space. And B, you've just annoyed me because I'm like, you should have just at least done a little bit of research for me to be able to open your email and actually think, oh, wait, there's some thought gone into this. It's not difficult to find out who I am. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm quite, active externally. And also it's really easy to see my role. And actually what's even more frustrating is that I can be a really great connector internally. I work in an innovation
Mm,
team. So
mm,
I might not be the right person for your product, but I could actually connect you with somebody who might be interested in it. And so it's having reps who don't really do their research and really think about, what is it that the product I'm trying to sell and what's the application rather than here's my entire catalog, have a look at it. It's I feel that that's quite a lazy way of trying to do sales.
yeah, it's loading up the spam cannon and
Yeah.
pressing fire, right? Yeah, it's something we always try to coach people against, right? It's making sure that you are personalizing the email, it's relevant to that individual, and you're focusing on a problem that you can help solve, not dumping every single thing that you do into one email.
Well, I think the biggest issue with dumping all down one ear, what they're essentially saying is, I'm really busy. If you could just look through all of my stuff and work out what's relevant for you and let me know, then we'll have a
Yes, yes.
conversation about that. And it's really lazy on their part and putting the onus on you to be doing their job as well. And it bothers me a lot. When I get them, I struggle not to critique it and send it back, but I'll leave it where it is. No one wants that.
Yeah, I like to say that people don't hate cold email. They hate bad, irrelevant, unpersonalized cold email. If I send you an email that solves a problem that you have right now and it was personalized to you, you're probably going to respond and be like, great, let's meet.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
Well, Saleha, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you at the ELRIG event coming up in early October. And maybe I'll just do a shameless plug for Succession because on October 1st, we're also doing a sales training workshop event for all of the vendors that are there the day before the event in London. So if you happen to be at ELRIG Drug Discovery, come by October 1st and we'll see you there.
Yeah. And one more plug that helps you. If you're a vendor at ELRIG and you show up to our session, then you're able to get a ticket to the chairman's reception, where all those high impact people will be socializing that evening that Saleha spoke about. And the only way you can get that invite is for attendance or being one of the presenters.
Wow, we basically did a commercial for ELRIG. Huh?
Yeah, we
Wow.
did.
Nice. I love it.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.